to toast the state of Illinois. Cheers. You guys finally moved the needle just a little bit in the right direction. It only took you over 3 years for something to finally be moving in the direction for the Chicago Bears to build a stadium within the state of Illinois. Indiana came knocking. Finally, you start doing something. Welcome back to the Halas Huddle. Today, I'm going to dive into the Illinois House Bill 910, the so-called Megaprojects Bill. All right, this is the framework being floated that could eventually support a new Bears stadium in Arlington Heights or anywhere else in the state, but it's going to be Arlington Heights, guys. Now, let's be clear. Right out of the gate, passing this bill does not automatically give the Bears the deal they want. What it does is it lays out the bones for what a mega project incentive could look like. And that's what we're going to break down today. Okay. I read the bill and we're just going to go through it and kind of put it into like layman's terms of what actually is being proposed here. We're going to cover everything from the tax incentives, tax exemptions. There's exemptions as well. Special payments, job creation, the rules, there's compliance, all kinds of stuff that's moving through. That's got to still look. There's a vote tomorrow. That's going to be a meeting with the Bears and the House Finance Committee. This was supposed to happen a week ago. This is the meeting that got canceled. And then all of a sudden the statement that the Bears were grateful and happy to see the HB0910 bill in Indiana get pushed through because it was like movement in the direction that they needed. Well, now Illinois seems to be on the precipice of also doing the same thing. They look like they're getting ready to finally put something into position. Not quite in the same way that Indiana has, but it's still movement, guys. It's movement. So what is the Mega Projects Bill? All right, what is it? Again, simply, it's the framework designed to handle massive developments. We're talking investments of $100 million, $250 million, $500 million or more, depending on certain criteria that needs to be met. Okay. I want to emphasize this is not, and I know it gets titled the Bears bill. This is not a bill that's being put out there specifically just for the Chicago Bears. Okay. This is a shell of a bill. Basically, it's a shell bill. It's not, we'll get into it, but it's not exactly what we're going to know for sure when it comes to what the Bears are getting offered here from the state of Illinois. What we do know, okay, right off the bat, I want to put this out there, okay, because look, I've put out a lot of content regarding this, the stadium project, the stadium development, and the property tax situation. And it was specific to the stadium itself, right? The stadium proposal was always between 2 and 2.4 billion on what that was going to cost. But that didn't include the mixed use development. That didn't include the infrastructure, all of that surrounding area. And if we're going to talk Arlington Heights, that's the 326 acre plot of land. There's a lot to be done there. And within that area, you know, there was talks of hotels, there was talks of retail, you know, restaurants, there was talks of residential. And people have already been stating, oh, well, they don't want, you know, they want the tax incentives just for the whole development. It's not just for the stadium itself. Well, yes and no. But one thing for sure is that residential developments are not eligible. It doesn't matter. It can't be lumped into the full development. The residential developments, it specifically states, is not eligible. This is going to be remove that from being part of this tax freeze. Okay. The bill lays out everything pretty much from start to finish. There are tax exemptions on building materials. We'll talk about that. The property tax freeze, that to me is the biggest thing here. There's negotiable special payments or pilots that, again, is part of that tax freeze. But there's specific compliance that must be met. Job creation, minority contracting requirements, project labor agreements, again, oversight and compliance mechanisms that must be met. So again, let's think of it as a shell law. It's not set up to be the end all be all. It's more like a structure. And why? Because, I saw some people complaining. In fact, I think it was a woman who's actually running for Congress who was complaining about, oh, of course it's going to be a shell bill, right? Well, yeah, because it's not specific for the Bears. Like, you could have all of these other developers come in and build these projects if they meet these requirements. There's going to be different scenarios that play based on what is being done. What does that development look like? So you can't have ironed out specifics because it just can't be that way. So I think the way it's written, I think it's pretty good. I will tell you, I do have some issues and concerns from an Illinois taxpayer perspective, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. Again, it's not the final deal, guys. Not the final deal. A lot of negotiating still to get done. Before we get into the property tax stuff, which is my bread and butter, I want to talk about one of the things in here that I do think is kind of important. And it's also a thing that I've seen people who are trying to read this bill misunderstand a little bit. But this is the building materials tax exemption. Okay, so first up, the building materials tax exemption. Basically, the contractors who are doing the work on this, they can avoid paying state and local use taxes, retailer occupation taxes, service occupation taxes. This exemption can last up to 10 years with a possible 5-year renewal. So let me stop right there, because this is what I kept seeing is people were stating that the tax freeze was for 10 years. No, you're misreading it. It's not the tax year that's for 10 years. That's actually quite longer. We'll touch on that in a little bit. This exemption for the 10-year exemption is specific to building materials. Okay, so contractors are required to report annually to the state to maintain compliance. And here's the key: if they fail to comply, the exemption can be revoked, and the company would actually have to pay back the taxes that they were able to be exempt from. And for the Bears Stadium specifically, like in any associated entertainment that might be happening in that district, this could mean tens of millions in upfront savings on construction materials alone. That's huge, especially because, look, 2023 is when they were pushing to get this thing started. Inflation has only caused construction costs to go up. So that was that $2 billion number is going to require either more dollars or you're going to get less of a stadium than what you were hoping for when you originally put out your plans, right? So this should help in that regard and keep things to where it needed to be. But it's a big financial incentive that's baked into this bill. All right. The bread and butter. This is what it was mostly about. The Chicago Bears, when they bought Arlington Heights, went through a horrible process with the Cook County assessor. Okay. A horrible process. I've talked about it at length. And if you're new to the channel, you want to check it out, please, first of all, subscribe. Please be subscribed to the channel. We do a lot of fun stuff here. In the process of trying to connect with people regarding giveaways that we just did. Somebody got a Bears jersey that I'm trying to reach out to get him a free Bears jersey. We got some Halas Huddle swag that we've been giving away. We've given away bobbleheads. Brian Urlacher photos that were sideline photos from Soldier Field. I mean, there's so much that we try to do to help continue to build this community. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Make sure you come back for more than just stadium talk, because we do a lot of Chicago Bears talk right now, a lot of draft talk, a lot of free agency talk. So, all right. Property tax freeze. Okay. Again, I think this is the thing that was most important because of what transpired when they bought the property and what Fritz Kagi had done right off the bat before the Bears even owned the property. Okay. But this bill will allow the assessment of the property to be frozen at a base year value, which is the value which is the value before the mega project improvement actually starts, right? So there's no development in place. So as of right now, for example, the property is worth $114 million, according to the assessor. I'm rounding that, but roughly $114 million. They pay about just under $4 million in property taxes right now. Okay. So that value, let's pretend that, their shovels are in the ground. they're getting ready to build in 2027. 2026 would be that base year. So what that value is as of 2026, that would be the base year going forward. So right off the bat, people are going to be like, really? So they're only going to pay $4 million? And that was my first thought too, when as I was reading through this. In fact, Mark Batnick, and if he watches this, I'm going to reach out to him. I'd love to get him back on the show so we can talk through this even further as developments happen. My concern when I was reading through it before I got to the special payment portion of it, the pilot portion of it, was that really the Bears are going to only have to pay $4 million in property taxes. That is a really shitty deal for Illinois taxpayers. And I know they're getting offered a way better deal from a business standpoint from Indiana when it comes to what they would be paying in property taxes down there is essentially nothing. It's just, I get the sense that they do want to be in Illinois still, right? Especially George McCaskey. It's definitely how things are feeling. So it would be surprising to me that he wouldn't. It would be surprising to me if he took the Indiana deal as long as Illinois got close, right? I don't think necessarily like he needs to, date the girl, the prettiest girl. He's okay taking, the girl who looks just as attractive, or guy. I don't want to, gender stereotype here, but someone who's still very attractive, and he would prefer to stay in his home base town where the Chicago Bears have been basically forever. And I know it's not always been in Chicago, and we're not going to be in Chicago and be in Arlington Heights, in the state of Illinois. I think he would prefer that. So again, I think he would take a slightly worse deal to stay in Illinois. But $4 million to me just seems way under compared to, where the rest of the league is from a stadium standpoint and their property taxes. We talked about SoFi being at just under $9 million. But even, looking at the United Center at like $6 million, and looking at Wrigley Field, that's like $3 million. That just seems asinine to me. So it really bothered me, but I kept reading and there was more. So, if I get Mark on the show, he can attest to it because I was texting him about the situation. But anyway, so there's that base year. That means any new construction or improvements do not increase the property taxes during the freeze period, right? So again, I'm like $4 million, that's it. And here's the biggest part. That freeze could range from 23 years all the way up to 45 years, depending on compliance with certain requirements. That additional 5 years has to do with something I don't think that would actually come into play for the Chicago Bears. So I think it'll be anywhere between 23 and 40. But again, so to give an example, if the property has a base year market value of 114 million, let's say it qualifies for a 10% level assessment, which is what it currently does now, they'd be paying roughly 3.4 million. Again, that's where it's about approximately right now at that vacant land site today in Arlington Heights. The big part that I was struggling with, and I'm glad to see is written into this part of into this bill, amendment of the bill, is the pilot special payments program. Okay. The pilot program is basically payment in lieu of taxes. So instead of getting your property taxes calculated out with your tax rate, your equalization factor, your level of assessment, it's literally going to be a set schedule of payments is typically how it's going to be. Now it could be a flat fee. Maybe they just say, okay, you're going to pay $10 million for, the whole length of the 23 years. Or maybe you're going to pay, some type of incremental increase where you're going to start at $10 million for the first 4 years, and then it's going to jump up to, 12 million for the next 4 years. And then it's going to be 14 million. It's going to have some type of incremental increase that would apply to it. There is a specific minimum that's in here, but it won't apply to the Bears. So for most projects, the bill sets a minimum that companies must pay, and that's going to be at least 10% of the pre-base year property tax. So that's the floor. And this same woman who is running for Congress, I blank on what her name is. She's some type of notary, Jane the notary. I'm blanking. Anyway, she had commented on my Twitter post tonight, and pointed this part out and basically made it seem like she thinks that because the Bears, okay, so let me back up for a second. It gets interesting for the big stadium projects because anything over $2 billion, that 10% minimum doesn't apply. Okay. that means that payment just becomes fully negotiable between the developer, which would be the Bears in this case, and the local municipality. In this case, is Arlington Heights. So you have a situation where it's written, yes. Could they get away with paying basically nothing? Sure. I guess the way that it's written, there is that small chance. That being said, I don't think there's any way that that's actually going to happen. What I think is going to happen is what this bill essentially does is it gives these developers an opportunity to go to the local municipalities, whatever town they're building in this case, Arlington Heights. Maybe they're building in Elgin. Maybe they're building in Schaumburg, right? Like they can go, well, Schaumburg is state of Illinois, not Cook County. So you go and you communicate with the local municipalities and you can negotiate what type of property tax pilot you're going to have, right? What type of special payments you're going to have. Well, that was something you just couldn't do before, right? The local municipalities don't assess your property, right? They come up with a budget, that implicates what the tax rate might be. But in reality, your assessed value, your market value, that's set by the Cook County assessor. So in this way, you can go negotiate, get a special payment, fixed payment, escalating payment. It could even include some type of portions of revenue from tickets or concessions or other income streams, depending on what type of development it is. And I personally, again, I think it needs to be around that $9-10 million mark to get started. I think that's what's fair. I think that's what's reasonable. And anything less than that, I will have an issue with. But we can't have the Bears or any franchise or any big development, even if it's not sports related, having to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes because they're not going to come here. And that's why you're seeing businesses leave the state of Illinois. So again, the Bears would almost certainly pay at least that base year property tax, roughly that $3 to $4 million. But I think, it's going to be something above that, right? Let's quickly hammer out the rest. Job creation, minority contracting, and labor agreements. This is all part of the bill as well. New Illinois-based full-time jobs must be created. Relocating existing Illinois jobs does not count toward meeting the requirement. 20% of contracts must go to a minority-owned business. Developers must enter into a project labor agreement before construction begins. And then annual reporting is required, and violations can trigger, I mentioned this already, violations can trigger revocation of exemptions or termination of the incentive agreement. This ensures that the mega project has real local impact and not just benefits for the developer. Okay, so this is just trying to keep the everything at home is really what it's trying to do here. And then oversight and public review. The bill also sets up a local review board to evaluate applications and maintain transparency. Members include municipalities, park districts, and other taxing districts. Votes are weighted based on each district's share of property taxes. All meetings are public and adhere to the Open Meetings Act. Municipalities must provide all relevant plan documents to the board, and annual reporting is required. Again, this creates accountability for both the developer and local government. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the show. Today, because it's releasing today, Thursday, the 27th. Thursday, the 26th. There is a meeting scheduled. It's a House Finance Committee meeting that was supposed to take place before. That meeting was now rescheduled. It's now going to be Thursday. And from what I'm hearing, it's going to pass through the House Finance Committee. It's going to get passed. But the way that they were able to get this shell created, it's actually likely that they could actually try to get a House vote, because this still has to go through the House, it still has to go through the Senate, then has to be signed by J.B. Pritzker. So if we're looking at this, just getting through the House committee, I think that's a good step in the right direction. That's the whole point of this, right? It's a good step in the right direction. I mentioned in our last podcast that I didn't want to talk about the stadium because I knew that there was stuff brewing. There's still a long way to go. There's still negotiations to have with Arlington Heights and the Bears. And I know ongoing negotiations have happened, but until this bill is passed and you have this shell to work from, it kind of limits what you can negotiate because you don't know what your starting point for negotiating is, right? The problem is that political support is not uniform, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about this because Mark Batnick talked about this to me directly, but he also was on I'm blanking on the show 97.9 something, a radio show that was specifically talking about this, and he mentioned labor. And labor is going to be what's going to help get that 60 votes. He was on our show. He talked about getting those 60 votes. That's what's important. But you're going to have Chicago. What are they getting from this? They're losing the Chicago Bears. Now they're going to Arlington Heights. I know it's still Cook County, but it's not Chicago. So Chicago lawmakers are probably going to cause a stink. There's already reports of got people who aren't even a part of this writing letters and sending it in. To try and negate this bill from being passed. And then you got Southern Illinois, right? Like, again, what are they getting out of this? So there's still a long way to go, but we're finally getting traction. We're finally seeing movement, right? It's a step in the right direction, it's a step forward. And I just want to emphasize again, even though we have this framework, it is not a done deal. And I can't comment. I know some people were asking me, well, what did the Bears give up? What did Illinois concede? Did they just cave? Look, I can't tell you exactly that until we know what the final deal is from Arlington Heights. Once we know what that final deal is, then I can comment on where I think it should have been. And obviously I've said it here enough, but I can comment on where it should have been versus where it is. Was it fair? Did Illinois just have to cave because of Indiana? A lot of that is partially true, but we won't know any of those details until we know what is actually in the deal specifically for the Bears. Again, this is not a Bears bill as much as it is a Megaprojects Bill. So there's a lot to be had here. Okay, so just sum it up. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to address from what I was reading through this thing. I guess, okay, real quick, a few other things. Other key points to remember: minimum investment can include contributions from affiliates. Transfers of ownership do not affect the assessment freeze, but must be reported. Companies cannot receive other property tax incentives, so you cannot combine this with TIF districts. Annual reporting and compliance obligations are strict. The bill includes a severability clause, meaning if one part is ruled invalid, the rest remains intact. And I forgot to write it down, but there are specifics to the amount of money. So it's $100 million is the lowest amount that you can have for development, but you have to have 100 full-time employees also added to that, right? And then it's $250 million. Then you have to have 50 full-time employees. And I'm blanking on what those numbers are. I will tell you that in the Bears project, there's no restrictions as far as full-time employees go. So it doesn't actually apply to their value amount, but anyone who wants to develop something, you're listening to the show, you want to go, you got $100 million to spend. You want to go put $100 million somewhere and put a development into a commercial property. You get 100 full-time employees. You can also take advantage of this Megaprojects Bill. Okay. That's what that means. I don't know. I guess my biggest issue as I end the show here is that why did it take this long? This is something I've been pushing for 3 years. This is something that when I talked with Mark, it just seems so simple, but it wasn't until Indiana got involved that the politics started moving faster. And I don't want to talk politics. You guys can talk politics in the comments. Feel free. I don't really want to talk the politics side of it. And I know it's a big part of this, but as a just regular, logical, rational person, it bothers me that this is how this works. It bothers me that you can't just come up with a fair, reasonable amount of money that would work in regards to getting something built here in the state. And I do feel had they started doing this in 2023, the show would probably be a little bit more heavily weighed in Illinois' favor than it would be in the Bears' favor. But because Indiana got involved, they had to give up more. So I don't know. go to the comment section. What do you guys think? I don't think I missed anything when it came to the actual bill itself, but if there's something that you're hearing or reading and you want more information on it, please put it in the comments. I'd love to continue the conversation there and you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I'd like to, you know, make sure that everybody is in full understanding of what it is that you're reading. And again, because I saw things like the 10-year thing, and that's not true. So if you're seeing things, you're reading things, and you want some further education on it, or you want me to look into it, maybe I don't know the answer, but I can get in touch with someone who might, leave a comment. We will touch on it. Otherwise, until something bigger happens, I'm going to let this go for a little bit. I'm going to let it rest for a little bit, and we're going to get back into some more draft conversation and draft talk next week. Until then, guys, bear down, claws up.
As after Packers always.